Coming up on today's show
is that deep work, so the ability to really work for long amounts of time with intense concentration, is becoming more valuable in our economy at exactly the same time that it's becoming more rare. People are losing the ability to concentrate at high levels, and even when they do have time put aside, they're losing the ability to concentrate when they have time put aside, and they just have less and less time free in their schedule.
I mean, people say, like, for example, you can go to a seminar and sit there for 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes you stop learning. I mean, things like that. Is this the same with deep work? Is there a time limit on how much you can do in one session?
I got into deep work because I was trying to be better at my job.
Deep work and how to do it. Today on Keeping You Organized. Hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today we're going to not talk to a professional organizer. We've got a really special guest. This gentleman has just written an excellent book called Deep Work, and we're going to find out what deep work is all about. So we're going to bring on Cal Newport. Cal is the assistant professor of computer science at Georgetown University. You know, I grew up in Maryland, kind of across the border there a little bit. But anyway, he specializes, get at this, in the theory of distributed algorithms. And he previously earned his PhD from MIT in 2009 and also went to Dartmouth College. Cal, welcome to the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
Now, this is kind of interesting. This whole thing of deep work, we're going to get into what it is and actually how you do it. But tell me how you kind of got interested in this stuff as it relates to your computer science background.
Yeah, well, there's two ways to see it. One is as a theoretical computer scientist, I study the mathematics of digital communication. And this book, in some sense, is about its impact on our life. But really, the real answer was I got into deep work because I was trying to be better at my job.
Okay, well, we have to start out right away defining what deep work is, and let's just let you take away with that.
Yeah, so deep work is my term for when you are focusing without distraction on a cognitively demanding task.
Okay, well, that's a pretty finite. Can you give us maybe a little more example of what that might look like versus because I guess in my mind I'm thinking, okay, I shut myself in a room, I focus on this thing without a lot of distractions. Is that it's got to be a little bit more than that, though, right?
Right, you're in the right ballpark there. So you have to contrast deep work with what I call shallow work, which is when you're doing work tasks that do not require your full concentration and aren't actually leveraging your skills to their fullest extent. So that includes logistical type tasks like answering emails or building PowerPoint slides or attending meetings or jumping on calls. And my argument, sort of the central hypothesis of my book, is that deep work, so the ability to really work for long amounts of time with intense concentration, is becoming more valuable in our economy at exactly the same time that it's becoming more rare. People are losing the ability to concentrate at high levels, and even when they do have time put aside, they're losing the ability to concentrate when they have time put aside, and they just have less and less time free in their schedule. So I argue, if you're one of the few to cultivate this ability, to train your ability to focus, to get better at concentration, and to really aggressively free and protect time for this type of work in your schedule, it's like a superpower in our current economy. You're really going to produce at a much higher level and much higher quality.
Now, would you say there is kind of a limit on how much deep work you can do? I mean, can you go more than 2 hours, or is hour? I mean, people say, like, for example, you can go to a seminar and sit there for 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes you stop learning. I mean, things like that. Is this the same with deep work? Is there a time limit on how much you can do in one session?
Yeah, research there's some consensus in the research literature that around 4 hours per day is the limit at which you can do actual extreme deep work at full concentration. But I should point out that most people don't even get anywhere near that in the typical day. Right.
So now the interesting thing about deep work, I think about this is kind of the important stuff in life, right? The important task. But, some of us have bosses and, they give us these trivial tasks, and then we got to, take out the garbage. I mean, you've got all these other things. How do you kind of classify and determine really what deep work is? I mean, answering emails for 2 hours straight, focused without interruption, is not deep work. Correct?
Yeah, it's not deep work. I think an easy way to tell whether or not something is deep work is ask yourself, if I took a recent college graduate, someone who's very bright but has no specialized training in what I do and no experience, how long would it take me for me to teach them to do what I'm about to do? So for tasks like, well, I'm taking out email, or moving information around, or maybe putting together some things on the slides, those are things that you could teach a bright person to do pretty quickly. They're not actually leveraging your hard-won skills. You're not actually applying your skills to produce a lot of value. So those would be shallow tasks. Sort of the key definition of deep work is not only are you concentrated and undistracted, but it's skilled labor. It's where you're actually taking what you know how to do best and trying to actually apply that skill to sort of the furthest extent. So it's what the right way to think about it is shallow work is what prevents you from getting fired, and deep work is what gets you promoted.
Right. Now, can you give an example maybe in your own career? You're a professor, but you're also a writer. What are some of the things that you qualify as deep work in your profession?
Yeah, it's pretty clear in my profession. So I have lots of shallow work obligations. In academia, famously, there's tons of committees and meetings and emails and questions about grades and these type of things. But my core skilled activity is actually doing research. So as a theoretical computer scientist, that's mainly proving mathematical theorems. So I recognize in my life that being better at concentrating and putting aside a large amount of time to think hard about these core problems, to really use my skills to its fullest extent, is going to be at the foundation of my success as an academic. So I really prioritize that type of work, even though there's a lot of pressure to let the shallow stuff overtake the whole schedule.
Now, there must be a backstory here on why you wrote this book then. Why did a computer scientist write this book about deep work, and what are you trying to accomplish by getting it out in the marketplace?
Well, I think people underestimate the value of deep work. I think most people would say, yeah, I'm probably too distracted. Maybe I should try to be a little bit more focused. Maybe I should try to pay a little bit more attention when I'm working. And what I'm promoting here is actually much more of a radical change to your professional lifestyle. It's not about just being a little bit less distracted. It's about training your ability to concentrate like you would grow a muscle or teach your ability to program a computer or learn any other hard skill. And it's about making deep work a central component, these long blocks of undistracted time, a central component of your schedule. And I don't know that a lot of people underestimate exactly how much value that could produce. We're not talking about you'll get a little bit better at your work. We're talking about orders of magnitude more productivity, the type of thing that can really unlock you and really push you ahead. So in some sense, after spending a lot of time focusing on improving deep work in my own life, I've become a bit of an evangelist for just the power of this skill.
Now, would you say that there's a certain personality type or kind of person that can anybody do deep work, do you believe, or do you kind of need some qualifications or a certain kind of personality to be able to do it?
I think anyone can do deep work, and I think anyone who's in a non-entry level skilled position can benefit from doing deep work. But I think the key idea to understand is that deep work is a skill, not a habit. So a lot of people think about it like flossing. Something they know how to do. It's just like, oh, I should do more of it, right? I should floss more. Actually, deep work is a skill like playing the guitar. It's something that until you really train it and practice, you train your mind to be able to focus and resist distractions, you can't actually do well. And that's important to emphasize because for a lot of people, when they're new to trying to put more deep work into their schedule, it's frustrating. They block off some time and they find that it's hard to concentrate. They still look at distractions, that it feels uncomfortable. And so they sort of give up on it. Like, this isn't so great. So I think it's useful to understand that deep work can be this huge boost to your productivity and satisfaction, but it requires that you build up to it. It's going to take some time. You have to train your ability to really do it well.
Well, now in the college environment, you work with a lot of students, younger people who are they open? Can you talk about this in like the course of your regular classes too, in helping them with their studies and things like that? And do you feel that generation is open to this?
Well, I think so. This generation's reaching a crisis point because they've almost entirely lost the ability to do this type of intense focus because it's the first generation to go through their whole schooling experience with mobile devices that can bring quick distraction to them at a moment's notice.
Right.
I'm not that old, but when I was in college, it was I didn't have a laptop, I didn't have a cell phone, so I'm sort of the last group of people to go through college who still had to sit down in a library, Carol, and actually didn't have any distractions. So college historically has been a time where if you're going into knowledge work, you learn how to focus on hard things, and that's going away. But the good news is, if you're one of the students who trains this, there can be a huge benefit. Years ago, I wrote this book about the study habits of the very highest scoring students at the very top universities in the country. And one of the surprising findings is often the very highest scoring students were studying a lot less than the students right below them on the GPA scale. And a big part of it was they were very good at concentration. They could sit there and concentrate with blistering intensity, and in 2 hours do what the standard student might do in an all-nighter of distracted work.
Now, in the book notes, it talks about neuroscience and philosophy and how some of those practices work into this. Can you explain that real quickly?
Yeah, so for example, one of the advantages of deep work is that it helps you learn complicated things real quickly. We actually have a neuroscience explanation for why this is true. When you concentrate on a skill without distraction, what's actually happening in your brain is the relevant neural circuits are isolated and firing again and again in isolation. And it's that isolated firing that allows them the connections to strengthen. There's a myelinated sheathing that happens. So the actual act of learning something hard depends at the neuronal level of keeping your concentration on what you're doing without distraction.
That's fascinating. Well, listen, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to get into how we do this, how we can actually learn to do deep work. We're with Cal Newport from calnewport.com, author of Deep Work, and we'll be right back. When you've got it together, everyone can tell. Your confidence is obvious. Introducing Viewables.com from Smead. Use the Viewables labeling system to transform your drawer of hanging files into a tidy, organized filing system. Using the premium hanging folder tabs, see the label from the front, top, and back. It's easy. Access Viewables.com from any computer, tablet, or internet-enabled smartphone. Let's make some labels. It's free, and there's nothing to download or install. Choose the label type and format your label just the way you want. You can even add index characters or icons for distinctive filing. Set up a free Viewables cloud account, and your secure login lets you save your projects for convenient access from any computer. And with Viewables multi-purpose labels, you can use one label for any type of file, including hanging folders, top tab folders, super tab folders, or oversized items like notebooks and file boxes. Upload a list of file headings and print your complete set of labels in moments. There's even a library of templates for commonly used label sets. It's never been easier to set up neat-looking files that have easy-to-read headings and efficient color codes. Obviously organized. Viewables.com. From Smead, keeping you organized. We're back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about Deep Work, a brand new book, but also a concept that Cal Newport, who's joining us right now, Associate Professor of Computer Science at Georgetown University, and this book has just come out here. And Cal, before the break, we talked a lot about the background, some of the scientific background, the shallow work versus deep work. But now let's learn how to do it in our short time we have left here. How does someone go about learning to do deep work?
Right. So if you want to commit to having more of a deep life, there's 3 types of changes you have to make. The first type is you actually need to start training your ability to focus more. The second type of thing you have to do is you have to begin working on your productivity and scheduling habits so that you have time regularly put aside for this type of deep, intense focus. And the third, which is perhaps the less expected and more controversial, is that I think it's important to take some steps in your own life that show to yourself that you take focus seriously. In my own life, for example, I've never had a social media account. And for me, that is the type of thing I do, not just because it gives me more time and concentration, but actually signals to myself that, hey, my ability to concentrate is very important.
Right. Well, we talk a lot on this show about productivity, because I want to hone in on that one for a moment, because people like systems, they like ways to do it. Do you have a system or are some productivity tips that you can give us that will help us kind of, and maybe even get into what does a deep work session look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. If you have a ritual or routine that you do to start and end every deep work session, I get into the science of this in the book and the examples of it in the book, but this really helps because what happens is it allows you to slip into this mindset of deep work easier. So you don't waste as much mental energy and willpower changing your attention to something deep. So this could be as simple as you put a do not disturb sign on your office door, you shut it and you dim your lights, or something as complicated as you go for a walk on a certain path through the woods or the garden like Charles Darwin used to do. The details don't matter so much as just having a consistent ritual or routine connected to your deep work sessions can really raise the probability that you're going to have a good intense session.
Now, do you suggest maybe having these at the same time, or maybe analyzing your schedule and say, you know what, I'm not as sharp in the afternoons, maybe mornings would be good? Or is it something that you kind of say, well, you look on a day-to-day basis, decide that day, or decide for the coming week? How do you schedule your sessions?
Yeah, it's a good question. In the book, I actually go through different strategies that people use because the idea is you want to match a scheduling strategy to your job. But the two most common for people in knowledge work careers where they have a boss is either you have a set time that you do every week or every day. This is often for people early in the morning or maybe later in the afternoon. It's called the rhythmic method. The other common one is that you actually schedule the deep work a week in advance on your calendar and treat it like a meeting or appointment. So like anything else that you have scheduled on your calendar, that's then protected time. So if someone says, hey, can you jump on a call Wednesday at noon and you have deep work scheduled, you can just say, oh, I have a thing then. How about later? So depending on what your job is like, usually one of those two is going to be the best fit. I tend towards that latter one. I schedule my deep work on my calendar about a week in advance, like a meeting or appointment.
Now, what's the percentage? So if you have a 40-hour work week, how many hours of deep work could you? I mean, you've got classes to teach and all kinds of things to do. What's realistic, do you think?
Yeah, so I'm probably on the relatively high side. I try to get in about 20 hours out of 40
Wow.
on deep work, which is hard with classes and otherwise. But I think what's more important than a specific number is having a clear target. And in fact, I actually recommend talking to your boss or to yourself if you're self-employed and say, let's agree on what ratio of deep work hours to shallow work hours I should be trying to hit each week. Because when you actually have a number pinned down, be it large or small, you now have something to use as leverage when, say, trying to schedule your week or taking on responsibilities or getting out of responsibilities. I think talking with your employer pretty clearly about deep work and shallow work and what you're accomplishing with your deep work and what you need from them to hit the ratio discussed is important. If you don't talk about it, most people are just going to keep trying to take your time and attention without restraint. So I think having a conversation about it can be an important first step towards really making it a part of your work life.
Now, in the earlier part of the show, we talked about, what would be a length of time, but do you talk any in the book about breaks? Like if you're on a 2-hour deep work session, taking a break every half hour for 5 minutes to clear is clearing your mind even part of that, or should you just be focused that whole time?
Yeah, you do need breaks. So I think somewhere on the 60 to 90-minute scale is about as long as you're going to be able to go with focusing on something before you let your concentration to break a little bit and relax. But the key thing is we know from cognitive residue theory, which is something I detail, that when you take that break, it's very important that you don't turn your attention briefly to something that can capture your attention. So do not look at your email inbox. Do not look at your social media feeds, because if you even glance at something that you know that you're going to have to deal with later, like an email message you're going to have to respond, that's actually going to gunk up your cognitive machinery for many minutes, 15 to 30 minutes to follow. So you do have to take breaks when doing deep work, but they need to be breaks that don't give your mind something unrelated to see or latch onto.
Now, part of your concept is controversial. You're telling people to get rid of their social media accounts. How's that message being received out there?
People say, it's great. I'm not going to do that, but I'll use it less, which I guess is a step in the right direction. And I am being a little bit provocative when
Right.
I say, quit social media. But I think underlying that is kind of a serious message that, if you take your ability to focus seriously, and I really think many more people should, then you should be wary of services, say like Facebook, which, despite their marketing, are just advertisements selling products by media companies that spend a lot of time to figure out how to capture your attention. So it's pretty dangerous if you're trying to increase your ability to focus to also regularly expose yourself to tools whose whole purpose is to reduce your ability to focus.
Right. Well, in the book, you talk about the concept of draining the shallows. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so if you have so much shallow work on your plate that there's just no time left for you to schedule deep work, obviously you're not going to get deep work done. You're not going to get the benefits. So my approach to shallow work is you want to minimize it as much as you can without actually causing trouble, and then be as efficient as possible in tackling the shallow work that remains so that you can keep your time more clear for deep work and your mind more clear for doing that type of thinking. So there's, of course, many different, this is what you'd consider like classical productivity tips that I go into exactly how I manage all the shallow work in my routine, for example, to make these shallow obligations not disappear, but become a much more smaller and tractable part of your schedule as opposed to essentially all you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, do you actually schedule time for shallow work as well? Or how do you deal with some of that stuff?
Yeah, I think most people, especially knowledge work, just their whole day is shallow work, and they're driven in a reactive manner, usually by what shows up in the inbox or what's scheduled on their calendar. And I think it's much better to actually schedule, okay, when am I doing shallow work today, so that you can batch it and be more efficient. In fact, I'm a big proponent of what I call time blocking, which is I don't think you should run your day on a to-do list. I think you should actually have a schedule for your day where you blocked off all the hours in advance and said, here's what I'm doing during this hour, here's what I'm doing during these 2 hours. Actually confront the reality of how much time you have, what you want to do, and how much time that's going to take. And once you actually see your schedule in these terms, then you can decide, when am I doing shallow work? And you can arrange it in a way that's probably going to be a little bit more efficient than if you just sort of let your day unfold in a reactive manner.
All right, let's have a confession time here. Have you ever started a deep work session and then all of a sudden just say, I'm not in the mood, or I can't do this? And what do you do when you get a situation like that?
Yeah, it happens because deep work is incredibly energy intensive. Focusing is hard, which is part of the reason why a lot of people don't do it that often. I think it's fine to abort a deep work session. You know your own body. If you have this sense of, I just don't have the energy right now. I mean, I'm just not able to focus with the type of intensity that matters. Instead of sort of doing it poorly, just step back, look at that daily schedule and say, okay, what am I going to do instead? Just be a little bit intentional, choose something else. I think that's perfectly, appropriate. The goal is probably not to have 100% hit rate with deep work. The goal is to try to just keep your hit rate pretty high.
Well, listen, that's incredible, and we're trying to keep this podcast deep, which means we're out of time right now. So what I want to do is give you an opportunity to tell people how they can connect with you and where can they get the book.
Right, well, you can get the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or find out a lot more about the book or me and a lot of my tips and ideas about deep work at calnewport.com.
All right. Well, Cal, thank you so much for taking this time and blocking it out in your day. I know you've got a lot of interviews going on. The book is just out now, and it's getting a lot of rave reviews as well. So I think it's time for us to say goodbye, folks, and get into the deep work, get the book, and we'll see you next time on Keeping You Organized.